in Gaza Strip fire. Dutch judges convicted 3 men of murder for their role in the 2014 shooting down of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 over Ukraine and sentenced them to life in prison. A 4th man was acquitted. MH17 was a passenger flight that was shot down over eastern Ukraine on 17th July 2014, killing all 298 passengers and crew. The 3 men convicted were former Russian intelligence agents Igor Girkin and Sergei Dubinsky and Leonid Karchenko, a Ukrainian separatist leader. A 4th, Russian Oleg Pulatov, meanwhile, was acquitted on all charges. At the time, the area was the scene of fighting between pro-Russian separatists and Ukrainian forces, the precursor of this year's conflict. Stinhui said the men did not enjoy any immunity from prosecution as they were not members of the Russian armed services. The 4 men were charged with shooting down an airplane and with murder in a trial that was held under Dutch law. Phone call intercepts that formed a key part of the evidence against the men suggested they believed they were targeting a Ukrainian fighter jet. Of the suspects, only Pulatov had pleaded not guilty via lawyers he hired to represent him. The others were tried in absentia and none attended the trial. Victims of MH17, which had been en route from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur, came from 10 different countries. More than half were Dutch. The investigation was led by the Netherlands with participation from Ukraine, Malaysia, Australia and Belgium. A man was killed in an accident involving 3 trailers and 2 other vehicles at the North-South Expressway southbound near Slim River early this morning. A Perak Fire and Rescue Department spokesperson said that the department received a call at about 1 a.m. today, and firefighters from the Slim River Fire and Rescue Station were dispatched to the scene. Upon arrival at the location, it was found that there had been an accident involving 3 trailers laden with steel bars, a Nissan X-Trail and a Proton Iris. A 44-year-old man was trapped and confirmed dead by Ministry of Health personnel who were also rushed to the scene. The trapped victim was removed with special equipment assisted by 2 cranes. The body was then handed over to the police for further action. According to Plus Twitter account, the accident caused traffic crawls for 4 kilometers as all lanes were blocked and work to remove vehicles involved in the accident was being carried out. Traffic flow was slow on major highways this morning as Malaysians returned to their respective destinations to exercise their right to vote in the 15th general election tomorrow. Now, traffic was moving slowly on the Kuala Lumpur-Kara Expressway heading east from the Gombak Toll Plaza to Genting Sempah, Bukit Tinggi to the Bentong Toll Plaza and the intersection to the Kara Toll Plaza. In addition, the traffic flow on the East Coast Expressway LPT-1 and LPT-2 was moving smoothly but slowly. Traffic flow was also reported to be slow on the North-South Expressway from Sungai Buloh to Sungai Buaya, Lembah Beringin to Tanjung Malim, Slim River to Sungkai, Bido to Gopeng, and Ipoh South and to Ipoh North. The southbound traffic was also slow following an accident at kilometre 382.3 near Slim River, Perak, and kilometre 177.5 from Jasin to Tangkak, which caused a 3.5 kilometre traffic congestion. Traffic flow was also slow from Nilai to the Seremban Rest and Service area in Negeri Sembilan. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob joined hundreds of others at the Darul Fikri Mosque last night for the Solat Hajat Perdana Keluarga Malaysia special congregational prayers program. Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri, who is also the Warisan National candidate for the Bura parliamentary seat, arrived at the mosque at 8:15 p.m, accompanied by his family members. He then joined the congregation to perform the Isha prayer, followed by the Solat Hajat prayer, led by Imam Ahmad Hakim Samsudin. After the prayers, Ismail Sabri spent time greeting members of the congregation before leaving the mosque at 9:10 p.m. The special prayer was held to seek divine protection from natural disasters and disease outbreaks, as well as for the smooth running of the 15th general election and the preservation of peace and harmony in the country. Polling is on Saturday, 19th November. Various elements in the police force have been deployed to ensure polling for the 15th general election, GE15, runs smoothly. Inspector General of Police Tan Sri April Sani Abdullah Sani said the nomination day process on 15th November had gone smoothly except for a few isolated incidents that have been dealt with. Elaborating further through a statement released, the IGP said the situation is also under control during the campaign period without any incident that threatens public order. He is also confident that the voting process on Saturday will go smoothly and assured everyone that all measures have been taken to ensure the people can go out to vote safely. Tan Sri April Sani further advised the public not to be fooled by any fake news aimed at inciting fear and panic. He said they should not believe any speculation on public order and safety as well, and the police will give their full commitment to ensure polling goes on peacefully. The IGP added that stern action will be taken against any party that tries to cause a provocation that can disrupt public order and safety. On another note, the police refuted that there was a jam at the Customs Immigration and Quarantine complex of the Sultan Iskandar building in Johor Bahru, Johor, which allegedly occurred after Malaysians returned to vote, as seen in a viral video on social media yesterday. South Johor Bahru Police Chief ACP Raup Slamat said a 17-second video showing the incident went viral, but his investigation found that it was an old video. Commenting further through a statement released, ACP Raup said the recording is believed to be an old video being replayed and it is not true that it happened as claimed. The ACP also said that the video was triggered by Malaysians returning home to vote. He noted that at the moment the influx of travellers at CIQ BSI was normal and there was no sudden increase reported. The South Johor Bahru Police Chief added that the situation at BSI is normal as the number of people at any one time did not exceed 2,000. He further advised the public not to spread false news to create public annoyance. Finance Minister Tengku Datuk Sri Zafrul Abdul Aziz said if Barisan Nasional were given the mandate in the 15th general election, a stable government could be formed to continue all the policies formulated to assist the people and nation in weathering the global economic uncertainty. Finance Minister Tengku Datuk Sri Zafrul Abdul Aziz said the policies introduced before the dissolution of Parliament have clearly produced good results, with the national economy posting growth despite facing global headwinds, including from the geopolitical situation in Europe. He said the conflict in Ukraine and Russia, which has now also extended to Poland, has had an impact to some extent in addition to Europe's economic downturn. Tengku Datuk Sri Zafrul said that while Malaysia has been affected by the fallout, the economy has continued to grow due to the policies that were introduced and implemented. He said the economy grew 14.2% in the third quarter of this year, representing the fourth consecutive quarter of growth, while the first 9 months of 2022 saw a growth of 9.3%. He noted that the important thing is to look ahead, and if BN were able to return and form the government, they would continue the policies to help the people and develop the economy. Tengku Datuk Sri Zafrul, who is BN's candidate for the Kuala Selangor parliamentary seat, said that although the country is showing a healthy economic performance, Malaysia needs a stable government with a positive track record in order to prepare for the rising global challenges anticipated in 2023. M-Bank Research expects Malaysia's economic growth for 2022 to be at 8.5 to 9%, with fourth quarter gross domestic product expansion projected to hover at around 6 to 8%. The research house said in a note yesterday that growth will be supported mainly by private consumption, external trade and low base effects. However, for 2023, it is looking at slower growth of 4.5% as the downside risks become more pronounced. Malaysia's GDP registered a stronger growth of 14.2% year-on-year in third quarter of 2022 compared to 8.9% in the second quarter of 2022, the highest growth rate recorded since the second quarter of 2021, which is 15.9% year-on-year. On the supply side, the services sector increased by 16.7% year-on-year, manufacturing grew 13.2%, while mining and quarrying accelerated to 9.2% from a contraction of 0.5% previously. Exports grew robustly by 23.9% year-on-year, supported by strong demand for electrical and electronic products, while imports increased by 24.4%, second quarter of 2022, 14%. The trade surplus contracted by 32% year-on-year to 18.09 billion ringgit. Malaysia's headline inflation in September rose 4.5% year-on-year against 4.7% in August. On a monthly basis, it moderated 2.1% month-on-month. The unemployment rate, meanwhile, recorded a lower rate of 3.6%, declining 0.1% compared to 3.7% in August 2022. The Industrial Production Index also increased by 10.8% in September. Coming up in our foreign front, Myanmar junta frees Australian economist and former UK envoy, among others, in mass amnesty. But first, a large fire that ripped through a home north of Gaza City where fuel was being stored killed at least 21 people, including 7 children. Officials said firefighters had managed to contain the blaze in Jabalia that left charred walls and mounds of black soot before being put out. Gaza's Civil Defense Unit confirmed in a statement that 21 people had been killed. The head of the Indonesian hospital in Jabalia, Saleh Abu Laila, told AFP that the facility had received the bodies of at least 7 children. While the cause of the fire remained unknown, a spokesman for the Civil Defense Unit told AFP that supplies of fuel were stored in the house. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas considered the fire a national tragedy and declared a day of mourning on Friday, with flags to be flown at half-mast, and offered to send aid to families of the victims to ease their suffering. Crowds remained on the streets with hundreds of police and emergency response workers on hand after the blaze had been extinguished. Hamas said an investigation was underway to determine the cause. China's Shenzhou 14 astronauts completed their third round of extravehicular activities yesterday, with spectacular footage showing crew members embarking on a 5-hour-long spacewalk high above the Earth as construction of China's Tiangong space station continues. It was the first round of extravehicular activities for the crew since the assembly of the station's basic T-shaped configuration earlier this month, and the third overall spacewalk since the current crew began their mission in June. The China Manned Space Agency confirmed that the spacewalk was successfully completed after lasting for around 5.5 hours in total. The performance of the crew and the coordination with the ground team was later hailed as perfect by officials. This is the 7th round of extravehicular activities to be conducted as part of the China's space station construction process, with the previous 2 crewed missions also fulfilling key tasks. The Shenzhou 14 astronauts successfully completed their first 2 rounds of extravehicular activities in September, both from the airlock cabin of the Wentian Lab module. The first extravehicular activity lasted about 7 hours, while the second lasted about 5 hours. The three Shenzhou 14 crew members were sent to orbit in June to begin a record-breaking 6-month stint in space, the longest duration for any Chinese manned mission. As planned, the Shenzhou 14 crew will welcome the arrival of the Shenzhou 15 manned spacecraft at the space station later this month. The Shenzhou 15 crew members will join the Shenzhou 14 colleagues to complete the space station's first ever crew handover. Myanmar's ruling military has freed a former British ambassador, a Japanese filmmaker and an Australian economic advisor to deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi, among nearly 6,000 prisoners included in a mass amnesty. Australia said economist Sean Turnell left Myanmar on Thursday and had arrived in neighbouring Thailand, while a diplomatic source confirmed former British envoy Vicky Bowman had also left the country. Myanmar's state-run MRTV showed footage of Japan's Toru Kubota sitting with other detainees and diplomats signing exit documents with officials. The United States said its citizen, Koi Tae-u, was released. State-controlled media said the amnesty included 5,774 prisoners and foreigners were released for the relationship with other countries and also for humanitarian purposes. Turnell was arrested a few days after the army seized power from Suu Kyi's elected government in February last year, ending a decade of tentative democracy. The Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, AAPP, which had been documenting the military's crackdown on dissent, said the junta had freed the foreigners to ease political pressure. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida pressed Chinese leader Xi Jinping on regional security issues, including North Korea, as Pyongyang fired the latest missile in a record blitz that has sent nuclear fears soaring. Kishida said he had voiced serious concerns in his first face-to-face talks with Xi as the leaders of Asia's two biggest economies met on the sidelines of a Pacific Rim summit in Bangkok. North Korea fired a short-range ballistic missile as Xi and Kishida prepared to meet and warned Washington and its allies to expect a fierce military response. China and Japan are key trading partners, but relations have soured in recent years as Beijing bolsters its military, projects power regionally, and takes a harder line on territorial rivalries. Xi flew to the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation APEC Forum in Bangkok from a G20 summit in Bali, where US President Joe Biden also pushed him to use his influence to rein in North Korean activities. China is Pyongyang's main diplomatic and economic ally, and in May, it joined Russia in vetoing a US-led bid at the UN Security Council to tighten sanctions on North Korea. Kishida's office earlier condemned the latest launch by North Korea, which adds to a flurry that began this month and has included an intercontinental ballistic missile. Seoul and Washington have warned Pyongyang could be preparing to carry out a nuclear test, which would be its 7th. UN Chief Antonio Guterres urged rich and developing nations to stop the finger-pointing at crunch climate talks and reach a deal on covering the losses suffered by vulnerable nations battered by weather disasters. With the 2-week COP27 conference officially due to wrap up today, negotiators in Egypt said the talks would likely go on overnight as they scramble to find a compromise over the contentious loss and damage issue. Guterres said there was clearly a breakdown in trust between developed and emerging economies, adding that the most effective way to build confidence would be to find an ambitious and credible agreement on loss and damage and financial support for vulnerable countries. The intervention from the UN chief comes as the climate talks teeter on the edge of failure as poorer countries least responsible for global emissions lock horns with rich polluters over the creation of a loss and damage fund. A 130-nation group known as G77 plus China issued a proposal to create the fund at the COP27 and agreed on the nitty-gritty details at the next UN talks in Dubai in 2023. After dragging their feet over loss and damage, the United States and European Union somewhat softened their position by agreeing to discuss the issue at COP27. Guterres called for progress across the board on the goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. Rich nations should also finally deliver on their unmet pledge to provide $100 billion a year since 2020 to help the developing world green their economies and adapt to future impacts and make progress on future financing. Observers at the talks said loss and damage could be a make or break for COP27. Elsewhere, West African coastal states held their first major talks on boosting cooperation against terror violence spilling over from the Sahel after more countries announced they would pull their peacekeepers out of Mali. Gulf of Guinea neighbours Benin, Ghana, Ivory Coast and Togo are confronting increased risks from militants waging war over their northern borders in the Sahel. As part of the so-called Accra initiative, representatives of coastal states, the European Union and others met in the Ghanaian capital for talks on security and intelligence cooperation. In the first quarter of 2022, Africa recorded 346 attacks, almost half of which were in the west of the continent. Launched in 2017, the Accra initiative includes Benin, Togo, Ghana, Ivory Coast, as well as Burkina Faso. Mali and Niger have also since joined. The Accra meeting, expected to extend to next week, will also involve representatives from the EU and British government and the 15-member West African bloc ECOWAS. The Sahel's terror conflict began in northern Mali in 2012, spread to Burkina Faso and Niger in 2015, and now states on the Gulf of Guinea are suffering sporadic attacks. Across the three Sahel nations, thousands of people have been killed, more than 2 million displaced, and devastating damage has been inflicted to three of the poorest economies in the world. This week, Ivory Coast, which is embroiled in a separate row with Mali over detained Ivorian soldiers, said it would withdraw its contingent from the UN peacekeeping mission MINUSMA by August 2023. Coming up in sports, Zijia misses out on BWF World Tour Finals. Malaysia's professional men's singles ace Lee Zijia has failed to reach the BWF World Tour Finals in Bangkok, Thailand from the 7th to 11th December. Now, this is following the world number 2 shuttler's loss to China's Liu Guangzhou in the second round of the 2022 Australian Open at the Key Centre in Sydney. Zijia went down fighting 22-20, 15-21, 16-21 in 70 minutes. The result meant the 24-year-old Zijia remained in 9th position in the BWF World Tour Finals ranking with 54,930 points, with Guangzhou finishing 8th with 56,310 points. Only the top 8 players and pairs will qualify for the World Tour Finals. The National Stadium in Bukit Jalil has again been chosen to host this year's Malaysia Cup final on the 26th November. According to Malaysian Football League MFL, the decision to choose the National Stadium to host the 96th edition of the Malaysia Cup final, as it is considered a neutral venue that can accommodate a huge number of supporters and has the best facilities, thus capable of ensuring comfort and safety. MFL Chief Executive Officer Stuart Ramalingam said they also took into account the quality of the playing field, adding he believed that the Malaysia Stadium Board, PSM, with its experience in handling previous finals, would make thorough preparations in terms of field maintenance ahead of the final on 26th November. Stuart also said that although the MFL would have to deal with an increase in organising costs, the ticket prices for the Malaysia Cup 2022 final would remain the same as in this year's FA Cup final. The cheapest tickets are costing 50 ringgit and 70 ringgit for general admission, 150 ringgit for premium grandstand, and 200 ringgit for the VIP grandstand. He said said the ticket sales would be determined by the finalists as usual, because this way the number of tickets can be equally and fairly allocated to each club for sale to their supporters. 4 teams, namely the 33-time champions Selangor FC, Super League champions Johor Darul Takzim JDT, Terengganu FC, TFC and Sabah FC, are still slogging it out to reach the Malaysia Cup final. Senegal star Sadio Mane has lost his race to be fit for the 2022 World Cup and has been withdrawn from their squad, the country's football federation announced on Thursday. Now, he picked up his shin injury playing for Bayern earlier this month, but was named in the World Cup squad in the hope that he could regain his fitness in time. But it has now been confirmed that he will not recover in time. Senegal Football Federation officials announced that further scans had revealed he will require surgery. Mane is the talisman of the Senegal side and a key player for them in the attack. His absence will be a blow to their chances of advancing out of Group A, where they face the Netherlands on Monday before playing host nation Qatar and Ecuador. Rafael Nadal saved some honour on Thursday, beating Casper Ruud 7-5, 7-5 as he bowed out of the ATP finals in Turin at the pool stage. With world number 4 Ruud already assured of a semi-final berth, the match was in reality a dead rubber. On the very fast court of the Pala Abitur, Nadal was particularly aggressive. His service was particularly effective, with 16 aces and just 1 double fault, and allowed him to go to the net. After saving 2 break points at 4-4, Nadal won the first set by converting his first break point. The pattern was similar in the second set, except that Nadal was even more imperious on serve, conceding just 3 points in the set. And it was with a winning cross-court backhand that he closed the match on Ruud's serve. Meanwhile, American Taylor Fritz outlasted Felix Auger-Aliassime in 3 sets in round-robin play. With a 7-6, 6-7, 6-2 win, Fritz progresses to the semi-finals, where he will face Novak Djokovic, while Auger-Aliassime is out of the year-ending tournament. Both big servers, they came out all guns blazing, and neither player conceded a single break point in the opening set. Fritz quickly took the advantage in the tiebreak to lead 6-3 before taking it with his second set point. The second set was equally tight, although this time it was the 22-year-old Canadian who got the advantage in the tiebreak. Fritz finally found a way through his opponent's serve to go 4-2 in the third, going on to win the match after 2 hours 44 minutes. And that wraps up today's edition of Updates at Noon. In our top story today, 3 guilty as court finds Russia-controlled group downed MH17 aircraft. Till then, I'm Mohanapriya, yang sahih di RTM, #MyPRU15. Salam keluarga Malaysia and have a pleasant day.